No? Good IT, you have a MOP? Good. Your principal sent a special message to keep a watch on you. I hope you are going to ask a lot of questions today. Let's hope for the best. Once again, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. All the viewers watching this program live, very warm welcome to you, and it's a pleasure to have you online. And as usual, if you have any questions, please send it to the numbers which is flashed on your screen, and we'll pick up and place it before the distinguished panel to respond to all your questions, because this is a theme which is very rarely discussed. I'm quite sure you'll have a number of questions on the questions which is being discussed today. Now, coming to, I have another 2-3 minutes. I want to share with you what's happening in MMA next few days so that you do not miss them. The next event is happening on 26th of July. Very interesting event. The policy matters, we are joining with policy matters doing this. Seminar on reviving the manufacturing sector, why and how. This is happening with Sanjeet Singh. IR is a senior advisor at Senior Advisor Niti Aayog. He is also leading the G20 initiatives of India from Niti Aayog. And also we have A. Viswanathan, President of Delphi TVS, and Ishwaran Subramaniam, partner Deloitte, there are three, and this we're doing jointly with Madras Chambers. You'll meet a lot of people from manufacturing. Do come here. It's happening physically here. Then on 1st of August, again an interesting event, midlife career challenges for women. It's an online event. It's not happening in person. Please note, it's an online event. We have one of the outstanding speakers, Dr. Rajeshwari Krishnamurthy. She is Assistant Chair of Marketing, Center for Women Leadership at Great Lake Institute of Management. We are doing a lot of work with Great Lake. That's why we have another speaker also from Great Lakes today. We have Maithili Chandrasekharan, the Consumer Behavior Specialist, and also Babita Barua. She is Executive Director, YMRL and Regional Client of WPP, and Lata Rajkumar. So this is an online event to join us on the 1st of August. Then 16th August, we have discussion, another book on theme of the book, and we have very, very interesting. You know, Alladi, many of you may not know Alladi Krishnaswamy. Then his son is Alladi Ramakrishnan. Is Alladi's memory in how much the person was, valued internationally, and he was also father of our Indian Constitution, and what all he did, how he came up, and it's a fantastic story. You must listen to, and I will at least walk miles to listen to Alladi Ramakrishnan, his son, who is going to be here on 16th of August to speak to us. Then you all know we have done 10 years. We are completing the CSR initiative, and MMA also does a lot of CSR. We are very novice. We have just started only about 2-3 years back. We are now reviewing and seeing what all the changes taken place over the 10 years. What should NGOs do? What should the donors should do? And how the link between the both is happening? And what are the expectations? We are doing a full day conclave, the 10 years of CSR Madras Chennai CSR. That's happening on 19th of August. Then we have on the Madras Day. The Madras Day quiz is one of the most popular. This we're doing jointly with the Murugappa group. This is happening at 2 p.m. on 20th of August. The Madras quiz competition at the MMA. And it's also live. Please do come. The attractive prize money, this we are doing with Murugappa group. Then 22nd August, another book, Read and Grow. The theme is going to be finalized soon. Then on Monday, 28th August, we have again a very interesting event. As a part of Madras quiz, the Madras industrial scene. What is the Madras industrial scene with Chennai industrial scene? How much we have grown? What is the opportunity? Because we want to discover manufacturing. Then we are discussing during the Madras week all about Madras in terms of industrial revolution, what's happening in Chennai. Then on 31st August, again a very interesting event, International Advertising Association. You all know, but they do some phenomenal work. They do some work on Voice of Change. The Voice of Change is all about empowering women. How they are empowering women. We have got some outstanding panel from Bombay and different places. They are going to be talking to us. We have another minute. Quickly, I'll tell you another couple of events what we are doing. The event what you are doing on FEMA, it's happening at the Andhra Chamber of Commerce. Then empowering team on internal marketing. We're doing at Chengalpet our chapter. At Chengalpet, we have Mahindra World City chapter. Then we have the Mastering Your Finances, the Art of Money Management. We are doing it at Athur. We are doing it at Namakkal. We are going to Salem. And then we are also doing a talk at Institute of Management. All this is happening for you in addition to MMA. So please do come, and I think my 5 minutes allotted time is gone now. Coming to today's topic, before I go on to the topic, invite the thing, and let me also warmly welcome President of MMA is here, Mali Mahalingam, and he has taken over. He's a great source of inspiration and support to us. Thank you, Mali, for joining this evening. And coming to today's book, the book of beautiful questions by Warren Berger, and it's very, the question, reading the title itself is insight you to think, thought-provoking titles. And we have an outstanding panel today. I'll at least go miles to listen to them. All the three of them are outstanding achievers in their own way. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hand together to welcome Ramprasad, Director, CADD Center, Training Center. He'll be leading the conversation with the invitees. Suresh Ramanathan is the Dean and Principal of Great Lake Institute of Management, Chennai, and also Kishalaya Das is the Executive Vice President and Partner of Intellect Design Arena. May I request you please take your place on the dais, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm round of applause to our distinguished panelists this evening. Before I request Mr. Ramprasad to take it forward, let me briefly introduce the distinguished panel for this evening. Suresh Ramanathan, as he mentioned, he's the Dean Principal of Great Lake Institute of Management. He's done his PhD from New York Principal and also holds a Bala Balchandran Distinguished Professional Marketing. He's also done his Masters from IIM Calcutta. Joined the faculty of Mays Business School, Texas, and AM University. He was head of the Media Research Mechanics in India. Suresh is also a renowned educator. He has extensively experience in executive education, leading modules in customer value creation, brand equity, brand valuation, and he is heading one of the prestigious management institutions in India, Great Lake Institute of Management. Dr. Suresh, it's a pleasure to have you with us this evening. Then we also have another panelist, Kishalaya Das, is Executive Vice President and Partner, Intellect Design Arena. He is currently leading the sales and business growth of digital transactions and in banking. He is also responsible for providing pre-sales and consulting expertise, product management, marketing for his business. And he has been with Intellect Design Arena over the last 8 years and currently serving as Executive Vice President Partner, as I mentioned earlier. He is dedicated to driving the success growth of their customer by providing them with a cutting-edge transaction banking solution. You all know, if many of you are not knowing Intellect Design Arena, you must visit their website. If you get a time, you must visit that place to see what a fantastic work they're doing in the area of intellect design. Very warm welcome to you. Pleasure to have you with us. And most important person for MMA, and without him, I don't think we would have been able to bring this program month after month without fail for the last so many years. Is the Read and Grow program. One of the person who drives with the team of another two gentlemen is Sreenivasan Ramprasad, Director of CADD Center Chennai, and Sreenivasan is a founder, enable of some master. He did his master MSc Tech graduate, BITS Pilani, and also LLP practitioner. He developed equipped business of CADD Center in 1995. Currently, he is a director of CADD Center Training Services, Asia Pacific, and largest CADD training network with a presence of about in 30 countries. He is also ASA Chief Operating Officer. As a Chief Operating Officer, he was able to successfully go across the globe and concept of 3D printing services and architectural industry. He is an active Rotarian, having a Rotary Club of Madras West, and is his 50th president, made club more vibrant with his interpersonal skill. And a personal thanks to Mr. Ramprasad on behalf of President and all members for driving this initiative, which we are doing it mainly for the students, and also bringing some interesting book which otherwise you would have the inclination or time to go through that. And as much as like you, I'm eagerly waiting for. As usual, if you have any questions, the question slips are available with you. Please write the questions so it makes it simple. We could be able to accommodate as many questions as possible. All the viewers, once again, very warm welcome to you, and look forward to receiving your questions. And you are the people who support really enables you to bring in some outstanding programs. Sorry. Over to you, Ramprasad.
Thank you, Group Captain Vijay Kumar, for the wonderful introduction. Good evening, all of you. Are you ready for the questions? Okay, so first of all, I'd like to thank my panelist from the bottom of my heart for traveling all the way. One is coming beyond Mahabalipuram, Great Lakes, he stays there. Thanks, Suresh, for being here. And Kishalaya Das, Intellect Arena is somewhere in Padur, so he is also traveling all the way for this particular event. That shows the importance they are giving to this particular event. So I'm grateful to both of you for this presence. Thank you. So when I first came across this book of beautiful questions, in fact, which was suggested by Kishalaya Das, I was fascinated by the title itself, Book of Beautiful Questions. And I took some notes. It took the last 1 month I've been reading this book only. So, Warren Berger, the author of the book, raises questioning to an art form. The Book of Beautiful Questions is a vital read for anyone who wants to excel at creativity, leadership, decision making, and interpersonal skills. In fact, these are the 4 areas he is covering in the course of the book, which is about 273 pages, easy read. And there are close to 400 questions in the book, okay, which covers the 4 topics. Being an effective leader is not so much about having all the answers as asking the right questions. In the Book of Beautiful Questions, Warren Berger shows why questioning is critical to success. So these days, I don't know how many of you really ask questions to understand. In fact, how many of you really ask questions? So questioning leads you to success and provides hundreds of questions can help you to become a better thinker, partner, problem solver, and a great leader. This is by Marshall Goldsmith. Warren Berger helps you to understand the power of questions to change the world. So that's what the questions give you as power. So while we are confronted with almost any demanding situation in work or in life, simply taking the time and effort to ask questions can help us guide us to a better decision and more productive course of action. That's what the book is all about. So author says a beautiful question is a question that causes people to shift their thinking. And because of the shift in thinking, it is intended to bring about a change. So for every situation, you ask a question, think differently, and then bring about a change for your own growth. So like I earlier mentioned, we actually make decisions every day. How do you go about making those decisions? You create something every day. You foster your creativity. How do you go about doing that? How do you connect with other people? How do you have a good connect with other people? And how to be a good and effective leader? All these 4 areas are extensively covered in this book. And typically, in a crowd, many of us hesitate to ask questions, right? Don't we? Okay, so he also says the enemies of asking questions are first the fear whether somebody will think that if I ask a question, they may think that I don't know anything. Oh, it's okay, it's fine, okay? And second is knowledge. Okay, I already know, so why should I ask a question? With your limited knowledge. Third, you have your own bias and hubris. So I don't want to ask questions. I don't want to tell the world that I don't know something, so I don't ask questions. And finally, I don't have time to ask questions. So these are the 4 enemies. So he also gives some examples of questions like, if you want to be a beautiful questioner, if you want to ask questions, ask these questions to yourself first. Am I willing to be seen as naive? Somebody saying, oh, he's naive. Are you willing to be seen as naive? Am I comfortable raising questions with no immediate answers? You don't have answers for everything immediately, so am I comfortable in raising questions? Am I willing to move away from what I know? And am I open to admitting I might be wrong? So these are all the questions you need to ask if you want to ask more questions. And he also tells some more questions in these, for decision making. How can I see this with fresh eyes? What I might be assuming? Am I rushing to a judgment? What am I missing? So basically, if you look across the book, you find so many insightful questions which will keep you thinking. And he also says, okay, typical traps of the questioning is fear of the unknown, tendency to focus on the wrong information, overconfidence in our own forecasts, and inclination to favor information that confirms our pre-existing notions. These are some things which will actually prevent you from asking meaningful questions and do something better than what you're already doing. So he also gives a comparison between, are you thinking like a soldier or are you thinking like a scout? What is the difference? A soldier is typically has a different mindset of defense opposed to a scout. Scout is always seeking out, whereas soldier is defending. So he asks questions to test your intellectual humility. Do I tend to think more like a soldier or a scout? Soldier's job is to defend, while a scout's purpose is to explore and discover. Would I rather be right, or would I rather understand? Are we asking a question to prove somebody wrong, or are we asking a question to understand them? So do I enjoy pleasant surprise of discovering I am mistaken? So these are all some of the questions he shares in the book. And people who face a difficult question often answer an easier one instead without realizing it. So we always have the easy option. So the difficult question might be, I'm having problems with my boss at work. How might I address that? It's a difficult question. The easier question would be, given the problems I'm having with my boss, should I quit my job? Yes or no? So the first question could be answered in countless ways and requires some creative thought, whereas the second one is more instinctive and it's in the heat of the moment. So most of us opt for the second one because it's easy. Okay? So now, he also says everyone has fear. So how to overcome the fear of failure? What questions do we ask ourselves to overcome the fear of failure? So what would I try if I knew I could not fail? What would I try if I knew I could not fail? What is the worst that could happen if I try something? And how would I recover from that failure? What if I succeed? What would it look like? Now, these are some of the questions you ask yourself to overcome the fear of failure. So, and he also goes about some more questions to find your passion. What is my tennis ball? Okay, here he uses tennis ball like a dog chases a tennis ball because it loves the tennis ball. So what is your tennis ball? What did I enjoy doing when I was 10 years old? What are my superpowers? What are my real superpowers? In what way do I wish the world were different? And what is my one sentence if I have to describe myself? Now, if you ask all these questions, you will find out where exactly, what is your inner calling kind of thing. So, this is the first part about the decision making. Then he talks about creativity, how to be more creative, for which he starts off with what questions you should not ask yourself if you want to be creative. So first one is, am I creative? Okay. And how creative am I? And where will I ever find the original idea? Where will I find the time to create? Where do I begin? Now, these are the questions people ask before creativity. And Berger cites a originality myth, the notion that creativity must come from completely original ideas or sources as one of the great misconceptions about creativity. Almost all new ideas are a combination of pre-existing ideas. So he says, he points out the iPhone as a prime example. In 2000, Steve Jobs combined the elements of cell phone, BlackBerry, camera, and iPod into a highly original combo package. That's creativity. So it's not that you come up with something extremely original. It can be a combination of earlier ideas also. So if you want to find out how can I come up with a big idea, what stirs me, what bugs me, what's missing, what do I keep coming back to, what is ripe for reinvention? Now, these are the questions you ask. So likewise, when you keep reading the book, you come across these beautiful questions which will make you think again and again. So third comes the relationship. So we have got decision making and then creativity. Now, the major part is we need to have good relationship with people. So the question to ask, instead of just how are you, you can go about asking what's the best thing that happened to you today? It will make them think and come closer to you. What are you excited about in your life right now? This is another question you ask. And what are you most looking forward to at this gathering? Right? These are some of the questions you can ask to build your relationship. What are you most passionate about? What problem do you wish you could solve? And what did you want to be when you were growing up? Now, these are some of the questions you can have in a conversation instead of saying, how are you, how do you do, what's happening, right? Now, this is something very, very interesting I came across. This is to build a great relationship with your spouse, right? what would constitute a perfect day for you? In fact, there is a set of 36 questions which he shares, which if asked, you'll have a great relationship with your partner. So I'll just read out a couple of questions. What would constitute a perfect day for you? If you could change anything about the way you were raised, what would it be? What does friendship mean to you? These are all some of the questions. Again, all easy and clear and questions which will make you think, right? Another important thing, if you're a great questioner, one quality you need to have is listening. You need to be listening 100%, listening with all your body, all your listening. So listening is something which we take it for granted. While all of you are listening to me, I'm sure you're distracted by many things, your thoughts, your mobile, it could be anything. So at the end of the day, if you're a great listener, the other person feels understood. But if you're just hearing and not listening, the relationship doesn't move forward. And we are also sometimes quick to criticize people. So before you criticize someone, ask yourself these questions. What's motivating this critical urge? How am I guilty of the thing I'm criticizing? How would I react if someone said something similar to me? What positive result do I hope will come of saying this? And am I deriving pleasure from criticizing? Now, these are the questions you have to stop criticizing, yeah? So this is the third part, building relationship. And the fourth part is the leadership. So all of us want to be great leaders. And before taking on a leadership challenge, please ask, what do I want to lead? Why do I want to lead this endeavor? What do I want to achieve from it? Why do I want to lead this endeavor? Why would others want me to lead them? These two questions should be answered. And to determine if you're ready to be a 21st century leader, ask these questions. Am I willing to step back in order to help others move forward? Or am I just looking at myself? Do I have the confidence to be humble? Can I learn to keep learning? And do I seek to create an organization in my own image? Now, these are the questions he asks you want to be a good leader. So what is the one thing I can do that would make everything else easier or unnecessary? What should we stop doing? At this moment, what is the highest and best use of my time? So there are several questions in this book which will make you think. So this is about leadership. And finally, he says, I am of the belief that questioning plus action can lead to a chain. Q plus A is equal to C. At the same time, questioning minus action equals philosophy. So Q minus A is equal to P. There is nothing wrong with this philosophy, but this book is geared to using questions to attain practical results. So I would encourage all of you to go through this book, apply questions. I'm sure it will have a great impact in your life. I'd like to end with one story, practical story, which happened in my career. It was probably in the early 2000 where we had recruited a person, a salesperson, who was posted in Bombay. 3 months down the line, there were no results. So we were in a dilemma whether to continue with that person or let him go. But we wanted to give him a chance, so I went with him, and then we went around meeting our clients. During the meeting, I was asking a lot of questions to my potential buyers. So at the end of the tour, he asked, are we allowed to ask questions to buyers? Am I allowed to ask questions? Why, what's wrong in asking questions? Because only if you ask questions, you can understand somebody. So that change, actually, he said, please give me 1 month's time, and he changed the methodology. He started producing results. He's one of the regional director in one of the leading companies in Bombay today. Now, questions can change your career. So with that, I have two lovely panelists here who have practical knowledge, one coming from the industry, one coming from the academia. So I'm going to ask more questions to them. So first question, yeah, first question to Dr. Suresh Ramanathan. So what are your key takeaways from this book, the beautiful book of beautiful questions?
So I actually obviously like the book a lot because it forced me to question a lot of assumptions that I made about how I do things. the kind of questions I use or ask normally. And bear in mind, as an academic, I always ask questions, right? So for me, asking questions is second nature, because all the research that I do is based on the questions that we ask. But sometimes, even when you do that, I think you go in with certain preconceived notions about how to think about a problem, about how to think about something, a phenomenon that is happening in life, right? And what this book basically gave me was a framework to basically start questioning those assumptions. And it talks about the biases that you may have, the the preconceived notions, the confirmation bias that you may suffer from. So those were all. I mean, I think we all know that, and we are aware that we have those kinds of biases. But having it pointed out and seeing it right in front of you certainly helps to reimagine or to rethink a lot of the things that you are doing or the frameworks that you apply, right? Having said that, I will also point out that at least some, and so I'm going to be a little critical, if that's okay with you. So coming at it from an academic's perspective, I think especially the section on decision making, where he talks about how gut feel is not the right way to do things, and instead actually you have to keep asking questions and dig deep into things. It's not always the case. So in the literature, we talk about what is called system 1 and system 2 thinking. Okay, so system 2 thinking is the more conscious, careful, logical mind. System 1 is more the quick, intuitive, gut feel kind of a mind. And Mr. Berger basically dismisses the idea of gut feel. And to me, that seems like, in a way, his own bias. Because if I looked at the literature that he cited, all the literature seemed to support his point of view rather than actually examine it critically to look at all points of view to then form an opinion. So it did seem a little biased in the way that he had actually recruited a certain set of literature to support his point of view. So maybe he needed to ask a few more questions, is my opinion. But having said that, I think the idea of challenging, of questioning, of deep dives, these are, I think, all wonderful, wonderful things that all of us should be practicing. And so I'll leave it with that.
Thank you, Dr. Suresh, for that wonderful perspective. Kishalaya, what are your key takeaways from the book? Yeah.
It's a really tough question because, there are 400 questions in there and a lot of concepts. But I'll just try to crystallize it. I was actually thinking when Suresh was talking. For me, there are 4 things which I took away from the book. And I read it in 2019. I just did some refresher. First is asking questions itself. I'm in sales, so it comes naturally to ask questions. But it's not like that for everybody. And, in India, specifically the kind of culture that we have is like, do it, don't ask questions. Like, today is Thursday, you pray to this God. I'm just giving arbitrary examples, but that goes into your system. You don't question. Like a white Caucasian child will question so much more than our kids. That's ever changing now, but it's still there. So the first thing is asking questions. I think when I read the concepts which Warren has spoken about, he's used a lot of examples to say, where you should ask a question, where you should listen more. So that gives you the insight that, how even mundane things, you should ask question to get more insights. Second thing is around the importance of the right questions, right? What kind of questions you should ask? I mean, we just had in a conversation just for class participation. In our industry, class participation isn't important because in office, the boss is watching. Who's asking question, who's participating? So what are the right questions to ask to get a desired, response, which will help you, either sharpen your knowledge or sharpen the team's knowledge or overall, advantage. And I think Ram covered the enemy of questions. This is very important. That I think fear of asking question is the easier part to overcome. But the most difficult part in our industry, we are in the knowledge industry, is the knowledge or expert-based mindset. So we are in a fintech. I work for a fintech company. Technology is changing by the day. I'm as good as my knowledge today. If I don't upgrade tomorrow, I'm useless. It's simple. It's simple. So if you're lost in your own world that I know this best, any field, I know this best and I don't need to ask questions, I don't need to take inputs from others, then you're a dead duck. In the corporate world, you're a dead duck. You will not survive. And all of you are aspiring management graduates, the students and, established people as well. It's a journey of life. We need to learn. And the best way to learn is to ask questions. You have to ask questions. And there's the other part I'll give an insight from a corporate standpoint is, in a public forum, be it a meeting, be it a gathering like this, when you ask questions, you get visibility. They don't teach that in the BA schools. I did an MBA too. Visibility is not about just writing communication. It's also about establishing yourself as an independent person who has an independent thinking process. So those are the three. And the last one I would say is, I come from a fintech. So for us, designing is very important. We design products, right, for banks. And in the design, you need to have the concept of design thinking. It's a very easy word or a difficult word depending on what you know about design thinking. But when you design anything, be it a jacket or a software or a house, there's a lot of planning which goes into it. But the key aspects of planning is spotting patterns and anti-patterns. You want to learn from, mistakes that people have done or good things which people have done, right? Ram gave the example of, Steve Jobs putting together the iPhone. He spotted a pattern, applied his own creative thought process to it, and gave you iPhone, right? It killed a lot of things in the world after that. So designing and spotting patterns and anti-patterns, you cannot do till you ask questions. And you have to ask questions to practitioners, you have to ask questions to academicians, you have to ask questions wherever. So I think those are the four elements I would say are big takeaways for me from the book when I read it.
Thank you, Kishi, for that. And it's funny, like while we are in school or college, the questions are easy, answers are difficult. But when you come to work, answers are easy, questions are difficult, in sense, because you're already fed with a lot of information, you want to share that information, you're biased, and you hesitate asking questions. So that's how it is. So now my next question will start with Kishi this time. What is, in all the, you said 400 questions, 4 sections. So which section did you really resonate with? What really made sense to you? Or which portion are you using in your day-to-day life or professional life? Then we'll come to Dr. Suresh.
Sure. Personally, for me, when I read the book, the questions about sparking creativity is what struck me. At that point in time, I was, I used to think I'm not a creative person. And generally, most of us, I'm an engineer, Engineers think straight. They can't observe different patterns which a non-engineer can. So I had that, blind spot in a sense. And I always used to believe that creativity is a difficult concept for me, right? When I read the book, I understood that creativity is not about thinking very, very different things, but to be able to crystallize, simple things like a process that you're doing. Can you make it better by using creativity? It's nothing. At the end of it, it's an idea. And creativity is, do not confuse with, like art forms. That's talent, right? Creativity can be in any sphere. Even when you're cooking, you're a cook, you can have creativity. That's how new cuisines come into place, right? And in our industry, if you're not creative, and for us, creativity is nothing but innovation. If we don't innovate, we are out of the business. I don't know if you guys know, in the industry, there's a term called the Nokia moment. Any of you students know what is the Nokia moment? You heard of this phone brand called Nokia? You know what happened to Nokia? Okay, so Nokia, oh yeah, somebody's answering. Spot on, it's pretty much that. So Nokia was the world leader in communication. They used to make phones as well as the mobile communication towers, right? And they were so happy with what they were doing. They just kept launching the same kind of products, just changed the screens here and there, no innovation. And they were minting. It was probably one of the top 10, global companies worldwide. And then iPhone happened. Okay, within 6 months, Nokia, half of their factories were shut. Okay, that's called the Nokia moment, that you become so happy with what you're doing, so immersed with yourself that you forget that there's a world and there are smart people like here who are thinking different things, right? So how do you, innovate constantly to stay ahead of the game? Any corporate, not just in fintech, has to think for the future. And I think Ram covered one very nice question. How do you think what you want to do 6 months hence? Right? All of us have been in school. When you're in class 9, you think, what an idiot I was in class 7 or 8. That's a realization, right? We can have that realization without going through the pain. And that is by asking questions, observing patterns. So creativity is something which is very, very important. And for me, when I read the book, it starts with saying, are you creative? And that's a question we ask ourselves. Oh, you know what? I don't think I'm creative. That's what limits your belief. Self-belief goes down. It's a limited belief question, which we should avoid even asking ourselves, forget anybody else. And we should, aspire to ask questions like, I will do it. I think I can take a shot at it, right? That's the kind of questions we need to ask. And it will trigger thoughts in you. Some will work, some will not work. In the book, there's a concept of, creativity is like a butterfly, butterfly flies around. It's beautiful to watch, but it flies around. So your ideas also fly around. So there's a concept of kill the butterfly. It doesn't mean that you actually catch and kill it, but you nail the idea down and then execute it. And when you do that, you will achieve success. But what are the parameters behind it? For a corporation, you have to see, oh, it's an idea. The first question the business head I'm in sales, so I have to think of ideas. I take it to the business. They will say, okay, how much money am I going to make from it? Right? Idea is good, but if it doesn't have money behind it, it's philosophy. Right? And in the corporate world, there's no philosophy. It's all about churning things, turning ideas, right? And creativity is also asking, what is a problem that I can solve? And another brilliant example in the book, which Ram resonated in his talk, was this whole moment of iPhone coming up, right? They took all the ideas and formulated from there. So it's not an original idea. The iPhone was a culmination of 4 or 5 different products which are already in existence. He just brought them together. So creativity is not that you need to have an original idea. You can build on something which is there and make it better. So that was, I think, a lot of learning from me personally, and I read that part, and I've been trying to practice it as much as I can.
Wonderful, wonderful, Kishi. Now, Dr. Suresh.
Yeah, so so many questions, but the question that really got me was one, I think you referred to it, was what is your tennis ball? Right? It's such a profound question. It's a question where you start thinking very deeply about what really drives you, why, what gets you excited in life and so on. And for many years, I don't think I had that. I didn't know what the tennis ball looked like. Maybe I was chasing ping pong balls. Maybe I was chasing, basketballs. They all look the same, or round in shape. But ultimately, I didn't know that, what I really wanted. And I'm glad that, you guys are all here, listening to this. Maybe at the end of this talk, you will actually have greater clarity on what exactly is your tennis ball. It took me a long time to discover it. My tennis ball is research, academics. That's what really excites me. And I worked in industry for 10 years. I worked in sales. I worked in advertising. I did, launched MTV in India, did everything. But at the end of it all, this whole thing of what is your passion? What is that tennis ball? It is, for me, it was research. It was digging deep into problems, asking those questions, and sometimes finding what we would call counterintuitive answers. It's not just about asking the questions, but the right questions, I think, as has been pointed out, because at least from an academic standpoint, the questions to which the answers are intuitive are not the right questions. The questions that are the right questions are the ones which lead to counterintuitive answers, which lead you to question the assumptions that you're making, which lead you to, try to find out a solution to two conflicting points of view. Those are the questions that really are interesting from an academic's point of view. The second point I wanted to touch on was also this notion of, the biases that people have. And, Kishalaya was talking about the iPhone example and the Nokia example. I'm reminded of another example. This is the story of Motorola. Okay, and back in 1998, there was an executive who basically was on a cruise ship somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico and was not able to reach his office. And so he came up with this idea of sending a whole bunch of satellites into space. Okay, and from where you could get a signal and you can receive not a cell phone, but a satellite phone signal anywhere you are on Earth. They thought it was a big idea. They invested probably something like $4 billion into this venture. In order to break even, they needed to sell 500,000 handsets. Guess how many they sold in that first year? Barely 10,000. Okay, and that was it. They went belly up. And so, to the point of creativity and the point of having, the right questions, perhaps they didn't even ask the right question, which was, will people have a use for this product? We think it is a great product. It has all the features. It has got everything that you need. It will give you connectivity anywhere you go. But guess what? It is $3,000 for a handset. And the cost per call is $8 a minute. If you don't ask the right questions on whether this product will actually appeal to your customer, it's going to fail, right? So creativity is not just about designing products. Creativity is about making sure that you're also asking the questions on whether this is actually going to matter to your customers. So that was something that I wanted to touch on.
Thank you, Dr. Suresh. In fact, finding your purpose is a very, very important aspect. Like finding your tennis ball is basically finding your purpose. I get reminded of the 4 questions of Ikigai. If some of you may have heard about Ikigai, what I love to do, what am I good at, what the world can pay for me, and what the world needs, right? These 4 questions will lead you to your purpose. And I come from a sales background, so for me, asking questions is very, very integral part of building relationship, because if your client has to trust you, you need to understand them. And if you need to understand them, the only way to go about is not assuming what they want or what they need, but validating your assumption and asking meaningful, insightful questions. So during my sales program, I have one full session of asking questions. Questioning skills is one of the key skills for a sales person. So coming to the next question to our panelist, I will start with Dr. Suresh. While you are in a conversation, how easy or difficult it is to ask questions? What do you think as a receiver when you confront a question?
I love to be challenged. So if someone asks me a question that that basically questions the assumptions that I'm making, that keeps me on my feet, makes me less complacent about what I think. And you talked about this. I think both of you talked about this tendency to believe that you are experts at something, right? Well, I can go in front of a classroom and probably talk for 3 hours without having any problem whatsoever, based on what I already know. But what really excites me is, as a receiver, having that one person in the classroom ask me a question that forces me to think, right? Takes me out of my comfort zone. And, we again talked about this, I think, Kishalaya, you talked about the fact that in India, we are not used to doing that. We sit in a classroom, our students sit in a classroom, passively listen to what the professor is saying, and then, take notes, and then they just walk out of the classroom. So I'm just going to urge you guys, challenge. Always challenge, because your wisdom will grow many-fold if you start questioning and challenging those assumptions. you're talking about what happens in the, you were saying about international or, the white or the child, right? You're giving this example of what happens in other countries. So I'll give you this example. I was, of course, in the US for about 22 years before coming back to India. And my daughter went to school there in Chicago. And in 10th grade, she was taking a course on history where there was absolutely, there wasn't a syllabus. It was a whole bunch of research papers that were given on various topics, Indus Valley civilization or, any other civilization, the Greek civilization and so on, whole bunch of research papers, often presenting different points of view on it. And her job was to integrate, synthesize, put it all together. And how do you do that unless you ask questions? How do you do that unless you basically know what questions to ask and challenge your professor or your teacher when it needs to be done? So, Ram, you asked a very important question. How do I feel as a receiver when I receive these questions, when I'm asked these questions? I feel motivated, I feel energized, and it keeps me going every single day. So,
Okay. So it's more of an encouragement for you when somebody asks you a question. Okay, great. And what is your experience? My question is, how easy or difficult to ask and receive, both?
Okay, I'll take the first one. I don't know how we are doing on time. Yeah. So on the question, asking questions, I mean, if you are, he's been on sales, I'm on sales, he's been on sales. To sell, you have to ask questions. If you're not asking questions when you're selling, you're doing a bad job because you don't understand what the person needs, right? We need to understand that. So I use a slight deviation from the book, but it's on questions. I use what I call a 5C question framework, which I use and I, ask my sales guys to use. First C is curious questions, okay? Second one is comforting questions. Third one is challenging questions. Fourth is confronting questions. And the last one is collaborating questions. I'll try to explain how it works. So we are in a B2B sale. We sell to banks, right? So I don't know how many of you know the financial domain is the most complex domain. It's much more complex than aerospace, right? Because there's money involved, right? So when you sell to banks, you're largely selling to the business owners in the bank, right? And you need to first understand what they're looking for. So you should start with curious questions. I never go and give a pitch to the head of wholesale bank in ICICI Bank. That's the stupidest thing to do. First is to ask curious questions. Just try to ascertain, and get some favorable response about the business, what he's looking for, what are his aspirations, right? Then you can formulate a strategy in your mind of what, he may be looking for. Then you change your track to ask some challenging questions, right? If you had this, what could you do? Today you're making $100. What do you need to make $200? Those are challenging questions, which will get that person to think what he wants to get out of his own role, right? Once you have achieved that comfort of that person or that team, or as the case may be, you ask confronting questions. That's when you get the elephant out of the door, okay? Then you know what his real challenges are, what are the problems that he's grappling with. And you will have disagreements, and it's healthy to have disagreements, because the moment you have disagreements, that person will start respecting you. If you nod your head, Haji sir, I will do, then that guy is never going to respect you, right? And when you've got into, so now you're basically proposing to your partner, right? Then you become the partner, then you ask collaborative questions that, hey, you know what, you need this, I don't have it, but can we work on it together, right? For an individual, what does it mean? You've grown from being a partner to a trusted advisor, right? And in that, from a corporate side, what do? You are actually making a lot of money while, you're giving him what he needs. So the whole journey is very important, and without questions, you cannot get there. So that's my 2 bits on this.
Thank you, Gishi, for the 5C framework question. In fact, during my tenure as a salesperson, we followed what we call a spin technique. You must have heard about it. Spin, which is easy to remember. situation questions, followed by problem questions, then the implication questions, which is implication of the problems, and finally need payoff questions, which is solution-oriented questions. Now, if somebody masters this 4 set of questions, he is likely to be successful in selling any product or services, however costly they may be, because it's a value selling. That's how it works. So my next question, before going to the questions from the audience, probably the last question, what is your view on current generation with respect to asking questions? Because you can answer it very well, like you just mentioned it. So are they asking a lot of questions, or are they following your instructions? So that is starting from you, and you are a leader. So naturally, I would want the same response, yeah? Current generation. Thank you.
No, I think the current generation is certainly very curious, but I think it needs to understand why it needs to. So let's put it this way: the current generation has a natural, innate curiosity, but it needs to be channelized, because I think it can go in very many directions. And therefore, what I find is that in terms of their willingness to ask questions, they're much more willing to question. They're much more willing to question status quo. They're much more willing to question assumptions, which we may have done. We may not have questioned those assumptions. I remember, growing up, I had only 2 choices, getting into engineering or medicine, as many of us here. If you're a science graduate, it was just engineering or medicine. Today, there are far more options. And I think a lot of the current generation is actually asking those questions. Should I actually do this? Should I do something different with my life? And kudos to all of them for it. But at the same time, like I said, I think it is important for this generation to be constantly seeking. And the scout metaphor that was used. Be a scout, always go out, look for things, don't just accept things, don't accept answers as they are, but always challenge those assumptions. So I'm optimistic, but at the same time, what I would say is that I'll give a different analogy, okay? I often tell my students, you're a potato in a sack of potatoes. Okay? What makes you different? What makes you different? Can you be a blue potato? If you can't be a completely different vegetable, can you at least be a blue potato? Can you be different? How do you become different? You become different if you're curious, if you ask questions, if you challenge, and if you grow. The more you are able to do that, the more you will stand out in a sea of sameness. Our educational system breeds, very unfortunately, the mediocrity of sameness. We hammer the nail that sticks out. We have exams that basically test exactly the same things over and over and over again, and there is not one bit of room for something that is different. And to me, that is the biggest problem that the current generation faces, that if the current generation is able to explore a lot more, and if we in this present generation are willing to encourage that, I think there is so much more potential with you guys to go to places that we could never have dreamt of. Thank you.
That was a great piece of advice, Dr. Suresh.
Tough one to follow.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, so my perspective is not very, different. I started my career in mid-90s, and I was working in an IT firm in Bangalore. And at that point in time, IT was at its nascent stage, and there was hardly anything to read up or know about the industry in itself. And what your team leader said was like, You're like a regiment of soldiers, you know. He said something, you do it. How that has changed now is absolutely dramatic. Today, a guy passing out from whichever college, he comes and joins, and he's asked to do something which he doesn't agree with. The first thing is he will rebel. He will say, why do I need to do this? What is the advantage of doing it? That's the good thing about the new generation. I think it's definitely improved a lot. We will reach the Western standards soon, for sure. Our education system is also changing. But the important thing is to assimilate, like Suresh said, how do you capture all of this, smartness or knowledge gained through questions and utilize it for benefit? Just asking questions is really not worth it. But how you utilize it, either to make it better for yourself or better for the people around you, better for your boss, better for your company, I think that's what's important. And the new generation is a lot more vocal about all of these things, for sure.
One quick question with a quick answer. They ask question, that's fine. When you ask question to them, how do they respond? Yeah. Not the academic questions, a practical question maybe.
When I ask my students questions, the first thing is to, I think, create a very collaborative atmosphere that doesn't intimidate people, right? Particularly when you have a power relationship. When you are sitting here, when I'm standing there as a professor and I have students in front of me, it really depends on the relationship that you establish with the students. The more you're able to nurture a mindset of inquiry, of active inquiry, that you are free to ask questions, challenge me. This is the truth. I tell my students, don't be afraid to say that what I'm saying is bullshit. I use those words. Okay, I have no problem being challenged. And I really want that to happen for the simple reason that, I think the book itself refers to this idea that everybody suffers from this tendency of, I know better than everyone else. And even as a professor, I'm not immune to that bias. And therefore, it always helps for my students to challenge me every now and then. And I often tell them that collectively, many of my students have been working in industry for 3, 4 years, 5 years. I tell them collectively, you guys have far more wisdom than I do, right? And so humility and creating the sense of a collaborative atmosphere where we learn together rather than me just simply imparting knowledge. I think the more that we are able to create that, the more we will have facilitation.
Thank you for that. Kishi, I have a slightly different question. Do you ask questions to your son? And how does he respond?
It's generally monosyllables. And then I have to ask further questions. Like, I'll tell you examples. So he's just getting into graduation. So he said, I want to do economics and maths. So that's a BSc course. Then I said, okay, what are the other subjects? He said, psychology. I have no idea what psychology does in a science, stream. It's become a fad nowadays. But I was just, I said, okay, it's your choice, but how will it benefit you? He said, no, I'll understand how human resources work. When I was his age, I didn't even know what is human resources. So it's a different ball game altogether. And I try to engage and ask more questions, but boys are naturally have better connects with the mom. So maybe the connect with me is a little lower than I would want to, but it's there, yeah.
That is a fair answer. Whenever I ask question to my daughter, her immediate response is, don't irritate me, pa. Okay, don't irritate me. Okay, I make her uncomfortable asking questions. Maybe I should change the way I ask questions. Thank you for that lovely insights from the book. Now we have the questions from the audience. The first question is from Mr. Kupaswamy, I think who's there right here. As per the good management ethos, you are supposed to come out with decisions, but not with doubts, which is a sign of weakness. So is it a statement or a question? You can ask the question. Yeah.
subordinate asking questions of the leader?
Yes. That's not like, see, when I say the responsibility, we come back with results, or come back with decisions, come back with betterments, come back with ideas. But whether it is one or you ask the negative question, then where the organization will end. Questioning itself is not.
Yeah, I'll take that. Sir, which industry do you come from? Which industry do you come from? Okay. The traditional industries. Okay. I'll try to give you that answer. It's not easy. I agree with you. Sometimes, let's say the CEO. I think that has changed. Let me tell you, sir, that has changed. So you're right. Supposing the CEO has given a sort of a strategy which the team is executing, right? So your question is, how can I go and challenge the CEO, right? But imagine if the execution gives you an opportunity to do it a little better from what has been designed. There's been a strategy which has been laid out. The senior leader, whether the CEO or whoever, the general manager, okay, has given that has to be done, right? As a subordinate, it's not that you're challenging doing it. You're challenging the way how it can be done. There's nothing wrong in that. But if the subordinate is challenging why it should be done, and there's merit in it, in the sense that, are we going to reap benefits by doing this? From a business standpoint, the business owner will surely understand. Because at the end of it, it's money, right? And if somebody says, oh, are we doing this? But you know what? It doesn't sell at all anywhere. So why are we doing it? It's the right question to ask. Your point is valid that, it's not a culture. But the culture is changing. It's changing in IT. It's totally changed. We get questioned by, engineering graduates. Can't really avoid. We have to give convincing answers and explain. Sometimes, most of these engineering grads are, young enough to be my kid. So you have to be patient, and we have town halls. Okay, the whole concept of, Western management is having town halls where, the whole team is together. You talk about your vision, you talk about your strategy. It's an open house for anybody to ask questions. So you need to create that sort of an infrastructure where people feel confident, and at the same time, the leader is able to disseminate his vision.
Okay, we can take it.
We'll discuss it.
Okay, so the next question is from Sharmila from Chennai. How can we develop empathy and active listening skills to connect better with others?
That's a great question. So, two things I think I would talk about. One is the book talks about listening, and the book talks about, not just listening, but I think it's also about what you feel after you listen. I'll go on to augment that with two additional ideas. It's not just about listening, but when you have conversations, it is about striking the right cadence in terms of what we call turn taking. Okay? Which means, when do you speak? When do you listen? When do you speak? When do you listen? There is turn taking that has to happen in a conversation. And if one person dominates and the other person is only able to get his or her words edgeways, that becomes a problem. But the bigger question is, can you develop empathy, right? And empathy comes more as what I would call a non-conscious process. It is not something that is conscious. It won't come by asking questions. And I will humbly submit to you that, again, the neuroscience literature actually talks about empathy as a very deep-rooted feeling that people have deep inside the brain, which occurs as a result of what are called mirror neurons that are activated when you see someone experiencing something. When you see someone feeling happy, let's say you have a smile on your face, that smile rubs off on you automatically, right? It's called emotional contagion. When research shows that when two people feel the same emotions at the same time, there is much greater connection between them, right? So if you smile and I smile at the same instant, We are connecting in that moment. We are together. Arthur Aaron, the person who's behind the 36 questions, he's one of the foremost gurus in terms of relationships. And in his work, he's talked about this idea of what is called a shared reality. Okay? When two people are connecting with each other in that moment, they are one. They are not two. Okay? They are one entity, and they are sharing the same feelings at the same instant, and therefore they become together. Okay? They are part of one, and that is really where true empathy emerges. So I hope that answers that question.
Thank you, Dr. Suresh. Hope Shamla is convinced with that answer. Third is from Akash from Pune. What are some strategies for making group decisions effectively and collaboratively?
Okay, so typically group decisions are made when you start discussing in a group. Earlier I just touched upon, patterns and observing anti-patterns, right? So let's say there's a decision to be made to do a particular thing in a particular way, right? And earlier the leader would just think to the best of his ability and sort of graph down that this is the best way to do. Today it's a very collaborative, sort of sequence which happens. First, the problem statement is put up. Then you say why the problem, why is there a problem? Is this the right problem to solve, first of all? Sometimes we solve problems without having an end goal in mind. And halfway through you realize that you didn't do it right. So that's the designing part. But the culture of openness has to be there if you want to have a collaborative environment across different types of people. So there is, in any engineering firm, you'll have the engineers who are junior, then you'll have the mid-level managers, then you'll have senior managers. In IT, you'll have architects, right? So all of them can contribute if you provide that openness. And you need to have series of discussions to crystallize to the strategy that you want to achieve. And then finally, the leader has to stand up and sign on it. If the leader still doesn't sign, then it doesn't become a strategy or it doesn't become a surface it. Look at it from different angles, spot anti-patterns. Anti-patterns are nothing but where mistakes can happen. And then you formulate and the leader says, hey, I've signed on to this.
Thank you, Kishi, for that. Hope Akash got the answer. Next is from Abhinaya from Nagpur. What role does curiosity play in leadership development and decision making?
Okay, so curiosity, the questions around curiosity are simple questions which are generally asked to evoke favorable responses, meaning you will get a response to it. So once you ask a series of questions around that, you will sort of get an idea of what the person is or the individual or the team is, talking about. And what was it? And basically, once you've got that, then you need to ask the next set of questions. I'm just reading that this curiosity questions are around questioning to get to the leadership and decision making. Leadership I'll leave for a moment, but the decision making will become easy in terms of what is it that we want to do, or what is the outcome that we want to achieve or the person that we are talking to is achieving. And basis that we can make a decision. Leadership is all around how this process is done, right? Whether there is an openness or it's a management style, right? Leadership is a management style. Not all leaders are, same. There are people who are very brash, like Steve Jobs. He doesn't listen to anybody. He asks why. He asks a series of why questions. He takes the decision. People execute. He's been successful, yes. So it's not necessary that leadership is always a democratic process. It can be different, but the end goal can be achieved through a transparent, open process. That's my take on it.
Very quickly to respond to that, I think curiosity leads you to solutions or options, not solutions, but options that you might otherwise not have considered. It gives you a plate of different things that you could actually consider. From a decision-making standpoint, obviously that leads to more complications because you have more options, right? But the fact that it actually led you to those options gives you a larger palette from where you can actually choose, right? So I think both of these go hand in hand. You could be a decision maker who basically considers only a very narrow set of options, then therefore your decision making could be far simpler. But in that process, you are not getting at the right answers, or you're not considering the full range of possible options. And so curiosity gives you those options.
Pretty much. Thank you. Thank you for that. More options you have, and as a leader, you need to look at the future very often. You would need to be a visionary, and curiosity brings about that vision. Next question is from Sailesh of Pondicherry. How can we overcome analysis paralysis and make more confident decisions?
I think, Ram, you touched upon this, that we ask a lot of questions, but if there are no actions, then it's a waste of time. So analysis paralysis is a conundrum to avoid at all times. And specifically, it works for everybody. I mean, if you're a student and you have some analysis to do and you need to take action, you need to act on it. You cannot procrastinate. Procrastinate will lead to paralysis. Decision making is not related to that. Decision making is like, Suresh just mentioned, you have various options and you choose the best option out of that. So there are two different topics in itself. Analysis paralysis is about being proactive, about making and taking actions. Decision making is making the right decision. So it is based on the right kind of evidence. You can ask somebody one question and he answers back and you think that it's right. He may not have given you 20 other contexts behind what that response is. So you, as a leader, you need to find out the right context and the right evidence to take a decision. That's my take.
Yeah. So action is more important when you ask questions. Otherwise, it will become philosophy. So next question is something interesting. How can questioning assumptions lead to more innovative and original ideas?
Okay, so I'll attempt to answer this with an example from my own life. I was a professor in Texas. I had a secure job for life. I had, it's called tenure, right? I had nothing to worry about. I could have been there for the rest of my life. And the assumption I was making at that time was that, do I need to do anything? I can just coast. I don't need to do anything. This is my life. It is well established. And then one fine day, I questioned that assumption, gave up my tenure, came back to India to take up a job at Great Lakes. Everything completely different lifestyle, a completely different way of doing things, a completely different workplace environment. But unless you question those assumptions that you're making, how do you even know that there are things that are out there that you could be doing different in life? If you take life for granted, if you basically are not prepared to disrupt yourself, how can you know what is out there as an option? So I would say that regardless of whether it is assumptions about products or assumptions about, various decisions about, anything about relationships, always question those assumptions that you're making, because the day you question those assumptions and you discover that the answer is that, there is something else that is out there that might actually be something that you want to consider, something else will magically open up for you. And so that's really what I would say.
I completely agree, Dr. Suresh, because many of the times I question assumptions in my life and got something more beautiful than what otherwise I would have got. So always question your assumptions and don't succumb to your assumptions. So the final question of the evening from Vichitra from Erode. Are there any cultural or social barriers to asking questions that we should be aware of?
Okay, this is actually a very nice and a very tough question as well. If you're operating in a multicultural region, India is multicultural in that sense. So the north of India and the south of India culturally are quite different. Today there is a sense of openness which is there, but it's important to know cultural nuances. And if you're dealing with a global, entity, then you need to know, like for example, in Japan, you can ask tough questions, but you have to be extremely polite asking them, right? In the US, you can be straight to the point. You can just speak as you're speaking to anybody else without thinking he's a customer or he's a friend. In Europe, courteousness would help, but you can be direct. In India, you have to say, Hanji sir, okay, can I get this? So those things are there. It's definitely something to be aware of. The more culturally aware you are, that better it is for you individually. In IT, we do a lot of cultural training. If somebody goes on site, let's say, goes to Kenya, right? It's Africa, so we do some cultural alignment training so that they're aware of the do's and don'ts. Don'ts are very important to know. Do's are okay. So yeah, it's good to be aware, and I think the more you are aware, the better you are facing cultural barriers.
If we can just add to that, and I'm again talking from a classroom perspective. In the typical Indian classroom, if someone asks a question, everybody looks at him or her and says like, yeah, why are you asking questions? And, you kind of, people look down upon, any of that. The same Indians, if they go to the US, they are the ones that ask the most questions. Okay. So, to the point where they can be exasperating, but yeah, still. But the point I'm trying to make is that the culture or the environment in which you are drives all of this. In fact, the practice of asking questions is driven by the peer pressure around you. If everyone else, if the culture of the organization, if the culture of the place you are encourages you to ask questions, then you will ask questions. If on the other hand, you are the squeaky wheel or whatever, you'll not be allowed to ask.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Suresh and Kishalaya, and thanks all of you for being with us. I hope you enjoyed the session on Book of Beautiful Questions. Over to you, group.
Thank you. Thank you. I think big round of applause to panelists. Been outstanding. So many things you learn. Even simple thing you say questions, but there's so many complex things are there in questions actually. Thank you, Mr. Ramprasad, Das, and Suresh. It's wonderful to have you with us. May I request Mali to please step forward and do us the honor of presenting the memento to the distinguished panelists and the moderator, please.
I'll send it to you, Suresh. Do you want to post it? You can.
Yeah. Thank you, Mali. Thanks.